Take her, my mother slurred. She's deaf. She won't hear anything. I did. Not with my ears. With her mouth. Every ugly word. I stood in the doorway of our apartment with rain dripping from my coat, watching my mother offer me to 3 men in black suits like I was the last thing in the room she hadn't already pawned. Linda Bennett was drunk enough to sway in her chair. A half-empty bottle of bourbon sat beside an overdue electric bill. Her lipstick had bled into the lines around her mouth. Across from her stood the man who made the apartment feel smaller. Ethan Calloway. I didn't know his name yet, but I knew power when I saw it. He didn't pace, didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. The other men watched him before they moved, as if even breathing required permission. My mother pointed at me again. She can clean, cook, whatever you need. Heat crawled up my neck. One of the men looked away. Ethan didn't. His gray eyes settled on mine, cold and unreadable. How much? I asked through my phone, typing the words and turning the screen toward him. My mother laughed. Ethan ignored her. Your mother owes $186,000. My stomach dropped. I looked at Linda. She suddenly found the bourbon fascinating. I typed again. If I work, the debt ends. Ethan studied me for several seconds. Yes. I should have been terrified. Maybe I was. But fear had lived in that apartment longer than I had. I knew its habits. So I typed one more sentence. You can buy my time. Not me. Something changed in Ethan's face. Barely. A tightening around his eyes. Then he looked toward the man beside him. Have legal draft 12 months. Salary included. Every payment documented. My mother blinked. You're paying her? Ethan turned toward her. I'm employing her. The distinction landed harder than a slap. 20 minutes later, I had packed one suitcase. As Ethan's men carried it downstairs, I saw another man standing in the hallway. Tall, dark suit, silver at his temples. Marcus Vale. He was speaking quietly into a phone. He assumed I couldn't hear him. Most people did. But Marcus turned just enough for the hallway light to catch his mouth. I read 3 fragments. Bennett girl. Key. Tell him tonight. My fingers closed automatically around the small brass key hanging from my necklace. My father had given it to me 8 years ago, 3 days before he died. Marcus looked up. Our eyes met. He smiled. Not kindly. Downstairs, a black sedan waited in the rain. Ethan opened the rear door himself. I didn't move. He followed my gaze back toward the apartment. My mother stood behind the window. For one terrible second, I felt 12 years old again. Ethan noticed. He walked back upstairs. When he returned, he carried an envelope. He gave it to Linda. 3 months' rent. My mother stared. Ethan's expression never softened. She comes because she agreed. Then his eyes hardened. Not because you sold her. For the first time that night, I chose to step toward him. Inside the car, Chicago blurred into wet gold beyond the tinted glass. Ethan sat opposite me. Silent. Controlled. Dangerous. I opened my phone. Typed. Turned it toward him. The man in your hallway called someone about me. His eyes lifted. I added another line. He said Bennett girl. Nothing changed in Ethan's face. Then I typed the final word. Key. His gaze dropped slowly to the brass key resting against my chest. And for the first time since he entered our apartment, Ethan Calloway looked surprised. If Marcus knows what that key opens, then someone knew you were coming before I did. Ethan Calloway said it without looking at me. That frightened me more than anger would have. The gates closed behind our car, sealing me inside an estate that looked less like a home than a fortress pretending to be one. Stone walls, black windows, cameras positioned beneath every light. Inside, people lowered their voices when Ethan passed. He showed me my room himself. 3 rules, he said, facing me so I could read his lips. Don't enter the West office. Don't touch business files. If the security lights flash 3 times, lock your door. I raised 4 fingers. His eyebrow moved. I typed on my phone. Rule 4. Knock before entering my room. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then Ethan nodded. Agreed. That was when I understood something important. Ethan liked control, but he respected boundaries when they were spoken without fear. By morning, I had learned the rhythms of his house through the work I had actually agreed to do. Breakfast trays, silver, guest rooms, coffee service outside meetings. Domestic staff were expected to enter quietly, finish quickly, and disappear from powerful men's attention. That made being a maid unexpectedly useful. The cook hummed when nervous. One guard touched his watch whenever he lied. A young maid named Sophie stiffened whenever Marcus entered a room. But she never stiffened around Ethan. I noticed things because silence had taught me to watch. People thought words carried truth. Usually, their bodies betrayed them first. Ethan apparently believed me about Marcus. He simply didn't trust me enough to act on it. Good. I would have trusted him less if he had. What I didn't know was that while I polished silver downstairs, Ethan was checking Marcus's phone records. Nothing. Then his security chief, Noah Reed, discovered 11 minutes missing from the hallway cameras, the exact window when I had seen Marcus make his call. Someone had erased it. That evening, Ethan entered the dining room carrying a notebook. He wrote something and slid it toward me. "Can you read lips from across a room?" I shook my head and wrote, "Depends on distance. Light. Angle. I'm deaf, not magic." His mouth almost smiled. Almost. Then he spoke while looking down. I tapped the table. He looked up. I pointed at my eyes. "Look at me when you speak." This time, he understood without the phone. Something shifted between us. Small, but real. An hour later, 6 men gathered in the west sitting room. I was told to bring coffee. It was exactly the kind of ordinary task that made men stop noticing I was in the room. Marcus stood near the windows beside Graham Calloway, Ethan's uncle. Ethan sat at the head of the table, saying almost nothing while everyone else competed to fill the silence. I placed the first cup down, then the second. Marcus turned away from me. His face disappeared, but his reflection didn't. The dark window behind Ethan caught Marcus's profile perfectly. His lips moved. "Russo knows about Pier 9. My hand stopped. Only for a second. Ethan saw it. I finished serving everyone and walked out without looking back. 30 seconds later, he followed. I typed 2 words. "Russo. Pier 9. His eyes sharpened. "Certain." I nodded. He stared toward the closed meeting room door. Then back at me. "Thank you." 2 ordinary words. Except no one had thanked me for noticing things in years. At 11:43, Ethan's phone rang. I watched his face change as he listened. Not panic. Calculation. When he hung up, Noah entered. Pier 9 was breached. Ethan's gaze found mine. "What did they take?" Noah swallowed. "No cash. No merchandise." A pause. "Only the accounting archives from 8 years ago." 8 years. My fingers went cold. That was the year my father died. Ethan slowly looked at the brass key around my neck. And suddenly, I understood. Someone wasn't looking for money. They were looking for the past. My father gave me this key 3 days before he died. For the first time, Ethan Calloway stopped looking at the key and looked at me. What was his name? I typed it. Daniel Bennett. Ethan went completely still. Not confused. Recognizing. My pulse jumped. "You knew him? Your father worked for mine." The room seemed to tilt beneath me. I shook my head immediately. Dad had been an accountant for a logistics company. That was what Mom had always told me. Ethan disappeared into his office and returned carrying an old personnel file. Daniel Bennett. Financial auditor. Calloway Logistics. My father's photograph stared up at me. I felt betrayed by a dead man. Or maybe by the woman who had lied about him for 8 years. Ethan pointed to the brass key. A tiny engraving ran along its edge. "C. 17. My father used private archive boxes," he said. "Off the company books." "Where?" "Private banking facility downtown." An hour later, Ethan and I stood inside a windowless vault while an employee checked identification. Box C. 17 was registered under 2 names. Daniel Bennett. Claire Bennett. Mine. My hands trembled as the brass key turned. Inside lay 4 things. A photograph. A folded note. For handwritten numbers. And a black chess knight. I picked up the photograph first. Dad stood beside another man outside a warehouse. Ethan inhaled sharply. My father. Thomas Calloway. 2 dead men smiling beside each other. I unfolded the note. For Claire, when watching becomes safer than listening. Nothing else. I checked the envelope. Empty. Ethan examined its torn inner edge. Something was removed. Someone had reached the box before us. The 4 numbers meant nothing to either of us. Neither did the chess piece. Yet, we left 20 minutes later. 3 blocks from the bank, Ethan looked into the mirror. His posture changed. Barely. Don't turn around. Naturally, I wanted to. A gray sedan has followed us since the garage. He instructed the driver through the partition, then sent a message. We turned left, then right, then doubled back. The sedan followed every move. Ethan didn't reach for a weapon. He tested them. That frightened me more. At the next intersection, Two identical black Callaway vehicles separated. Our driver took north. The decoy went south. The sedan followed the decoy. Russo, Ethan said. The name from Marcus's lips. My stomach tightened. Why follow me? Ethan looked at the key. That's what I intend to find out. I typed, take me home. His eyes hardened. The mansion is safer. My home. A long silence. Then he told the driver my address. No argument. No command. He could control half the city. Yet somehow the moments when Ethan chose not to control me were becoming the ones I remembered. My apartment smelled exactly as I had left it. Bourbon and disappointment. Mom was gone. I searched Dad's old boxes while Ethan waited near the door. Tax records. Photographs. A cracked watch. Then I found his chessboard. I almost missed it. One piece was missing. The Black Knight. My breath stopped. I pulled the knight from my pocket and placed it into the empty square. Click. A hidden panel opened beneath the board. Inside was a USB drive. Back at Ethan's mansion, we opened it together. Transactions filled the screen. Shell companies. Dates. Payments. Then I saw the final entry. 3 days before my father died. Ethan leaned closer. I read the recipient twice. My hands turned cold. G. Callaway. I looked at Ethan. There was only one Callaway whose name began with G. The man Marcus had been whispering beside. The man Ethan called family. Graham Callaway. If Graham was the traitor, accusing him now would be the fastest way to get us both killed. Ethan said it calmly. That was how I knew he was furious. The USB glowed between us on his desk. Graham Callaway's name reduced to a single initial beside 8-year-old transactions. I expected Ethan to confront him. Instead, he closed the file. One letter isn't proof. I stared at him. He was right. Someone could have planted it. Altered it. Used Graham's name deliberately. Ethan needed something happening now. So he created something worth betraying. The next morning, 3 men entered his office separately. Noah Reed was told a valuable shipment would move through Pier 7. Graham was told South Freight Terminal. Marcus was told Calumet Yard. None of the shipments existed. You're feeding them different lies, I signed. Ethan had learned enough to understand. Only one lie needs to travel. Then we waited. 41 hours later, Noah entered during breakfast and placed his phone before Ethan. Photographs. 3 Russo vehicles. Armed men. Calumet Yard. The lie Ethan had given Marcus. Ethan finished his coffee. Bring him downstairs. No anger. No triumph. Just certainty. Marcus was sitting beneath a single light when Ethan allowed me into the security room. His wrists weren't bound. They didn't need to be. 2 Callaway guards stood behind him. Ethan placed photographs on the table. You sold my routes. Marcus smiled. You have pictures of Russo men standing in a parking lot. I gave you Calumet. Silence. Marcus's smile disappeared. Ethan leaned back. You were the only one. For the first time, Marcus looked afraid. Not at Ethan. Past him. Graham had just entered the room. Marcus's eyes moved toward him for less than a second. Then away. Nobody reacted. Except me. I touched Ethan's wrist beneath the table. He looked over. I signed carefully. He looked at your uncle. Nothing changed in Ethan's expression. But something changed in the room. Marcus finally spoke. You think I chose this? Ethan's eyes narrowed. Who did? Marcus opened his mouth. A guard entered. His attorney is upstairs. Ethan went still. Marcus had been detained 17 minutes ago. For people new. Ethan. Noah. Me. Graham. I watched Graham's face. Nothing. That was almost worse. Noah quietly ordered the attorney's arrival traced instead of confronting Graham. By dawn, he had an answer. The attorney had received a one-line alert from a disposable number purchased through a shell company already linked to Graham. Ethan kept that evidence to himself. Graham still believed the warning had vanished with the phone. Later, Ethan found me packing. You're leaving tonight. I froze. Why? Russo knows you matter. I typed harder than necessary. Or you don't trust me. He crossed the room and placed my employment contract on the dresser. Then tore it in half. The debt is gone. I stared at the pieces. You're free, Claire. The words should have felt like relief. Instead, they hurt. Because I finally understood. He wasn't sending away an employee. He was trying to protect someone he could no longer pretend meant nothing. I removed my room key, placed it on the dresser. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then I picked it up again. I signed slowly. I'm staying. His eyes held mine. Why? Because now it's my choice. I did not call what I felt love. Gratitude was not love. Safety was not love. Even trust was not love. But Ethan had destroyed the contract the moment it became leverage, and I wanted to learn who we were when neither debt nor fear required me to remain. That night, neither of us slept. At 2:13 a.m., Ethan called me into his office. The 4 numbers from my father's box had unlocked an encrypted folder on the USB. One file appeared. Thomas, if I die? Ethan opened it. A photograph filled the screen. My father, his father, standing together outside a warehouse. The timestamp was 2 days before Daniel Bennett died. Then Ethan opened the next image. Someone had photographed them from across the street. Watching, waiting, and in the dark reflection of the car window behind them stood a familiar figure. Graham Calloway. Your father wasn't investigating my family, Ethan said. He was helping my father investigate someone inside it. The words changed everything. By sunrise, we had opened 11 files from the USB. Transfers, shell companies, shipping invoices. My father had traced Calloway money into businesses secretly controlled by the Russo family. Thomas Calloway had apparently discovered the same thing, and every trail curved toward Graham. But Ethan refused to move against him. Copies can be challenged, he said. I need originals. So he did something colder than revenge. He started dismantling Graham's power without letting Graham know. 3 accounts were frozen through intermediaries. Shipping schedules changed overnight. Cash reserves moved. 2 captains who normally reported through Graham suddenly received orders directly from Ethan. He didn't storm into rooms. He moved pieces. And watching him work made me understand why men twice his age lowered their eyes when he entered. Ethan Calloway wasn't dangerous because he lost control. He was dangerous because he almost never did. For 2 days, nothing happened. That should have frightened me. Instead, those were the strangest peaceful days I had experienced in years. At 2 in the morning, I walked into the kitchen and found the most feared man in the house staring angrily at his own fingers. I stopped. He hit his phone. Too late. An ASL lesson was playing on the screen. I folded my arms. Ethan looked almost embarrassed. Then he signed something. Badly. Coffee. I laughed. Actually laughed. His eyebrows pulled together. I stepped closer and corrected his hand shape. His fingers were warm. Mine suddenly weren't steady. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Then Ethan looked at me. Not at my ears. Not at my hands. Me. I stepped back first. Later, we sat across from each other with untouched coffee between us. Ethan told me his mother died when he was 19. After that, Thomas became harder. Then Thomas died too. Graham kept everything together. Ethan said. The family. The organization. Me. I watched the muscles in his jaw tighten. Suddenly, I understood why evidence wasn't enough. I signed slowly. You aren't afraid he's guilty. Ethan watched my hands. You're afraid you loved someone who was. His eyes dropped. That silence told me I was right. The brief peace ended the next morning. Noah entered Ethan's office holding a small black device sealed inside an evidence bag. Tracker, he said. It had been found beneath the rear bumper of the car assigned to me. Ethan's expression hardened. When, not here, Noah placed photographs beside it. The adhesive is old. It was installed before Claire arrived at the estate. My stomach tightened. Ethan ordered the serial number traced. 2 hours later, Noah returned with a company name. I recognized it. It appeared on my mother's loan paperwork. The same shell company that had given Linda money when every legitimate lender had refused her. I stared at the documents. Then at Ethan. Marcus hadn't discovered me because Ethan brought me into his house. Someone had been watching me before Ethan ever knocked on our door. Before my mother offered me. Before the contract. Before everything. My mother's impossible debt suddenly stopped looking like an accident. I reached for my phone, but my hands were shaking. Ethan read the sentence over my shoulder. Someone didn't wait for me to enter your world. I looked at him. They built a road to bring me into it. And for the first time, I understood the uglier truth. Ethan had never bought me. Graham had engineered the debt so someone in the Calloway system would buy control of Linda's obligation and bring the Bennett name, and eventually the key, within his reach. How much did Graham pay you to forget Dad was afraid? My mother stopped breathing. For 3 seconds, Linda Bennett stared at me across the table in Ethan's safe apartment. Then she looked away. That was my answer. Ethan stood near the window, silent. Noah had removed every bottle before we arrived. My mother's hands still trembled as though searching for one. I placed the tracker on the table. Then the loan documents. Then the photograph of Dad beside Thomas Calloway. Mom's face collapsed. I was trying to protect you. I hated that sentence immediately. I typed, from what? She rubbed both hands over her face. After your father died, a man contacted me. Graham. Her eyes filled. She nodded. For $1,000 every month. That was what Graham had paid her for 8 years. The condition was simple. Never investigate Daniel's accident. Never contact the Calloways. Never search for anything Daniel might have hidden. Mom called it survivor assistance. Even drunk, she must have known what it really was. Hush money. I pushed the brass key across the table. Her face changed. And suddenly I knew there was more. When did you see this? 3 months ago. My stomach turned cold. She had found it while searching my room for money. She called Graham. Told him Daniel had left me a key. Then asked for more money. Graham stopped paying her. Within 2 weeks, strangers began offering her loans no legitimate bank would approve. 10,000. 20. Then 50. She drank more. Gambled. Borrowed again to cover what she had already borrowed. Until the number became $186,000. I looked at Ethan. He understood before I finished processing it. The debt was bait, he said. Graham had never needed Mom's money. He needed her desperate. The lenders were fronts feeding distressed loans into a collection portfolio serviced through Calloway-controlled businesses. Graham could predict where Linda's debt would eventually land, even if he could not predict which Calloway man would handle it. Once the Bennett account entered the system, Marcus flagged the name. Linda had already told Graham about the brass key 3 months earlier. Graham had passed that detail to Marcus before the collection visit. Ethan choosing to go to the apartment himself had been chance. Everything that made the apartment appear on Calloway's radar had not. Marcus's words returned. Bennett girl. Key. Tell him tonight. My mother reached for my hand. I pulled away. You knew Dad was scared before he died? She whispered yes. And you took their money? Her mouth formed another yes. Something inside me went quiet. I didn't forgive her. I didn't scream. I simply stood and walked out. Ethan followed but didn't touch me. In the hallway, I sat against the wall. He lowered himself beside me. For once, the man who always had an answer said nothing. No promises. No orders. No empty claim that he understood. Minutes passed. Then I rested my head against his shoulder. He became completely still. Slowly, his hand settled beside mine. Not over it. Beside it. Waiting. I moved my fingers into his. Across Chicago, Graham was no longer waiting. By evening, Ethan's frozen accounts and changed routes had forced him to act. Noah intercepted communication between Graham and Vincent Russo. A captain's meeting had been moved forward. 48 hours. Ethan was the target. Then Noah placed a surveillance photograph on the desk. Graham and Russo stood outside a private club. Their faces were clear. I took the photograph closer to the lamp. Graham was speaking. I read his lips. Once. Twice. My blood went cold. Ethan saw my face. What? I looked at him. For words. That was all Graham had said. But suddenly the conspiracy wasn't about old ledgers anymore. It was about me. I signed the words slowly. The girl goes first. Ethan's expression didn't change. His hand closed around the photograph. And I watched the paper crumple. For the first time, Graham Calloway had made this personal. You're leaving Chicago tonight. Ethan didn't ask. A suitcase waited beside the door. A black SUV idled outside. On the table lay a flight plan to Boston and photographs of a guarded house I had never seen. I looked from them to him, then signed one word. No. His jaw tightened. Graham ordered you killed. I already knew that. You'll have security. No. Claire. I grabbed my phone. You tore up my contract and called me free. His eyes hardened. I typed again. Now you're building a nicer cage. That landed. For a moment, Ethan Calloway, the man who could move armed crews across Chicago with one phone call, had nothing to say. Then his mouth formed the words carefully. Alive is better than free and dead. My anger burned hotter. I signed slowly enough that he understood every movement. Then trust me enough to let me choose both. Silence. Ethan turned toward the window. I could almost see the war inside him. Control had kept him alive. Control had built his empire. Control was how he protected people. But protection without choice was exactly how my mother had justified every terrible decision she made for me. Finally, Ethan turned back. He picked up the flight plan, tore it in half. Then you stay under my plan. I shook my head. Our plan, he corrected. That mattered. 2 hours later, I sat inside Ethan's West office for the first time. Noah locked the door. A map of Chicago covered the table. Ethan showed me everything. Graham had demanded a captain's meeting at the Callaway Grand Hotel the following night. He believed Ethan's strongest crews were guarding southern routes. They weren't. Ethan had leaked false manifests. Noah already controlled the hotel's active security team. But the building was old, renovated in layers, and Graham had once overseen its internal operations. Noah warned us that legacy maintenance credentials and undocumented service access could still exist. He revoked everything on the current system and placed men at the known entrances, but he could not erase an access point he did not know existed. Two neutral captains had quietly received copies of the financial evidence. Graham's accounts were frozen. Russo's men were being watched. Ethan wasn't walking into a trap. He was letting Graham believe he had built one. Only one problem remained. The USB contains copies, Ethan said. I still need Daniel's original ledger. I stared at my father's note again. When watching becomes safer than listening. Watching, not hearing. My eyes moved to an old photograph of Thomas Callaway hanging above Ethan's desk. Behind him stood the Callaway Grand Hotel. And beneath one window, a security camera. I grabbed Ethan's arm. The hotel. 8 years ago, Thomas had maintained a private surveillance room there, hidden behind the old security office. Daniel had audited him. If Dad needed somewhere to hide evidence inside Callaway territory, Ethan understood. We entered the hotel after midnight. The surveillance room had been sealed for years. Dust covered dead monitors. Before we entered, Noah had shown Ethan the original floor plan, including a narrow maintenance passage behind the control wall, our emergency exit if Graham discovered us. Behind the camera control wall, Ethan found a narrow compartment. Inside sat a leather ledger. My father's handwriting filled the first page. Graham, Russo, dates, payments, everything. Then the door slammed. Red lights flashed. Fire alarm. Ethan immediately killed the room lights. Not fire, he said. A trap. Smoke began curling beneath the door. Noah's radio went silent. The prearranged signal that Graham had taken the bait and believed he had cut Ethan off. Ethan pulled me toward the documented secondary exit. Its electronic latch refused to release. Graham had found a way into an old subsystem Noah's takeover had not exposed. Through the frosted glass outside, a silhouette appeared. Graham. He lifted his phone. I moved closer to the glass. His lips were visible. 2 sentences. Ethan first. My heart stopped. Then Graham smiled. Make her watch. Down. I signed it once. Ethan moved before Graham's smile disappeared. A shot cracked through the frosted glass where Ethan's head had been. He pulled me behind the steel console as another round shattered the door window. Smoke thickened around us. But Ethan wasn't surprised. He pressed something beneath the old control panel. A narrow service door clicked open. You planned this. I planned an exit. I planned for Graham to think he knew more than he should. I didn't plan the old lock. Of course. Ethan prepared for danger. He did not magically predict every form it would take. We entered the corridor just as Noah appeared from the opposite stairwell with 2 Callaway men. The radio silence had been deliberate. Another layer of Ethan's trap. 10 minutes later, Graham walked into the hotel ballroom believing Ethan was cornered upstairs. Vincent Russo stood beside him. 6 Callaway captains waited around the long table. Graham began speaking about unstable leadership, compromised judgment, a boss who had allowed a woman to become a weakness. Then the doors opened. Ethan walked in. I followed beside Noah. The room died. Ethan carried my father's ledger beneath one arm. He placed it on the table. Sit down. Nobody argued. Even Russo's smile faded. Ethan didn't shout. He built the case piece by piece. Marcus's leaked routes. The Calumet trap. Russo's shell companies. Payments to my mother. Daniel Bennett's audit. Thomas Callaway's investigation. Finally, the original ledger. Graham's face slowly emptied. You sold our routes for 8 years, Ethan said. Graham laughed once. You think your father was better? No, Ethan's voice remained cold. I think you killed him. Silence. Graham looked at me. Ethan continued before Graham could answer. Daniel refused your payment at Pier 9 the night before the crash. Graham's mouth twisted. It wasn't Pier 9. The room went still. Ethan had never named a meeting place from the ledger because the ledger did not contain one. Graham realized it a second too late. Ethan's voice dropped. Where was it? Graham said nothing. Ethan opened Daniel's ledger to the payment entry. You just corrected a detail only the man who offered him the money would know. Russo turned toward Graham. Pressure cracked what denial had protected. Daniel found the accounts. Graham snapped. Thomas believed him. They were going to remove me. There it was. Not a convenient confession, but knowledge Graham could not explain away. Dad hadn't died in an accident. The financial trail, the hush payments, the surveillance photograph, and Graham's own correction finally connected him to the setup. 3 months later, records showed Thomas's supposedly private meeting location had passed through Graham's office before Russo's men appeared there. 2 fathers. 1 betrayal. 8 years. Ethan stared at the man who had raised him after murdering the man who had raised him first. Still, he didn't lose control. He turned toward the captains. You have the evidence. 2 men immediately stepped away from Graham. Then another. Russo understood before Graham did. The alliance was finished. Ethan had frozen Graham's money, exposed his network, split his support, and surrounded the hotel before entering the room. He hadn't come for revenge. He had come to end a war before it started. Graham's eyes suddenly shifted upward. Balcony. Nobody else noticed. I did. A shadow moved behind the glass railing. Wrong uniform. Wrong shoes. A maintenance badge hung at the man's chest. Noah had warned us about legacy access, and now I understood why. The credential belonged to an off-book series created while Graham still controlled hotel operations. The man must have entered through a service route before Noah's lockdown. Then Graham's lips formed one word. Now. I signed hard. Down. Ethan dropped. Noah's men moved instantly. The shooter was taken before he could fire cleanly. Russo raised both hands. It was over. By dawn, Graham had lost every Callaway protection he possessed. Ethan's attorneys had separated a prosecutable package from the organization's wider records. Fraud through legitimate companies, falsified books, extortionate lending, obstruction, and financial transfers that could stand on their own. Graham was taken into federal custody before he could leave Chicago. Russo discovered that Ethan had frozen the money feeding his northern cruise, closed his access to Callaway-controlled logistics, split his alliance with Graham, and turned neutral captains against him. Starting a war now meant fighting without financing, routes, or reliable allies. Russo withdrew from the north because retreat was the only option that did not end in collapse. Marcus lost his rank, and Ethan remained exactly what everyone feared, the boss. Later, I found him alone. He looked at me and signed carefully. Hurt. I shook my head. His hands moved again. Come home. I stared at him, then signed. Ask me. Don't decide. Something softened behind his eyes. He tried again. Will you come home with me? I smiled. Only if you understand something. I was never yours to own. Ethan stepped closer. I know. His next signs were slower, almost vulnerable. That's why I want you to choose me. And somehow, that frightened me more than anything Graham had done. Because I already knew my answer. 6 months after the night, everyone said Ethan Callaway had bought a deaf Maid. I made him sign a contract proving he had never owned any part of me. He read the final clause twice. No ownership. No operational control. No interference. Then he looked at me. You added the last one. I smiled. He signed anyway. 2 weeks later, the first office of the Claire Bennett Advocacy Center opened in a renovated building on the north side after months of legal setup, staffing, and planning, helping deaf workers find employment, legal support, and something I had spent most of my life fighting to keep. Choice. Ethan funded part of it. He owned exactly 0%. I made sure of that. He complained exactly once. I reminded him I knew where he slept. He never complained again. Some things had changed. Others hadn't. Ethan Callaway was still the Mafia Boss who controlled North Chicago. He hadn't abandoned his organization because love magically turned darkness into daylight. He had simply changed the rules of the darkness he controlled. No private lending operation could use the Callaway name without authorization. No captain controlled his own financial books. No single underboss could access every route. Noah Reed took Marcus's position only after proving during the crisis that he could coordinate captains, reroute logistics, protect reserves, and hold loyal crews together, not merely run security. Russo surrendered his northern operations after losing money, allies, and leverage. Ethan hadn't become less powerful. He had become harder to betray. Graham was gone from the Callaway world entirely, held in federal custody while the financial evidence Ethan released dismantled the legitimate businesses hiding his crimes. Marcus lost everything he had betrayed Ethan to preserve. Consequences, not chaos. That was Ethan's language. My mother was learning another one. Sobriety. I visited Linda during her 4th month in rehabilitation. She looked healthier. Not healed. Healthier. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said carefully so I could read her lips. I typed my answer. Good. She flinched. Then I added, start by becoming someone who doesn't need forgiveness every week. She cried. I didn't rescue her from that feeling. Some pain was supposed to teach us something. That night, I returned to the Calloway mansion. Home. The word still surprised me. Not because of the marble floors. Not because guards opened gates when my car approached. Because I could leave whenever I wanted. And Ethan knew it. I found him in the kitchen at midnight. He said something while facing the refrigerator. I threw a towel at him. It hit the back of his head. The most feared man in Chicago slowly turned around. I pointed at my eyes. You know I can't read your lips when you're facing away. His expression became almost offended. Then his hands moved. Sorry. His ASL had improved. Dramatically. He stepped closer. For once, there were no captains waiting. No enemies. No debts. No secrets between us. Just silence. Then Ethan raised his hands. I love you. My breath caught. He watched my face carefully. I signed, say it again. He did. Slower. Perfectly. I touched his cheek. She's deaf. She won't hear anything. She had been wrong about almost everything. I heard lies in eyes that looked away. Betrayal in moving lips reflected against glass. Fear inside clenched hands. And loneliness inside a man whose entire city mistook silence for strength. Ethan could command hundreds of men with a sentence. He could close streets with a phone call. He could make powerful people lower their voices simply by entering a room. But he never commanded me again. That was how I knew he loved me. Not because he protected me. Because he learned the difference between protecting someone and possessing them. Ethan Calloway ruled the city. But in the quiet place beneath all that power, he chose to let me in. He ruled with words. I heard everything he never said.